Hello, my name is Gene Monterastelli, and I am the editor of tappingqa.com. And the video that you are about to watch is an interview that I did as part of the 24 Hours of Tapping. The 24 Hours of Tapping was a free event, which was a fundraiser for the Peaceful Heart Network. The Peaceful Heart Network provides training and trauma relief tools to those in war-torn countries, as well as working with refugees all over the world. They've been able to help out over 200,000 people all over the world. After you watch this video, if you find this video something that was useful, the very easy way that you can say thank you to the guest for giving their time and sharing their expertise is to go to 24hoursoftapping.com/support and make a small contribution to support the Peaceful Heart Network. Again, that is 24hoursoftapping.com/support, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Our next presenter is my friend Nancy Forrester. Nancy is a clinical psychotherapist, retired, coach, international speaker, award-winning entrepreneur, and post-secondary educator. She runs her own mentoring consulting firm that supports individuals, couples, and corporations in creating safe, significant, and sustainable real-world results. Nancy is the founder of the EFT Training Institute, which offers fully accredited training and certification that establishes evidence-based EFT as the gold standard for professional practice in all human service professionals. Please welcome to the virtual stage my friend Nancy Forrester. Hi, Nancy.
Oh, Gene, so good to see you, and you're awake.
Barely. We're getting there. Home stretch. We got this.
I've been teasing people. If you were asleep, I would just go ahead and talk for the time anyways. But
Absolutely. Do what you got to do to make this sort of thing happen. So one of the things that I have been doing with the conversations over the course of the last now 22 hours is I have been asking people at the beginning the origin story for the topic that they're speaking on. So not their tapping origin story, not their transformation origin story, but this idea of post-trauma growth framework. We'll get a chance to step into it and talk about it and how that integrates with tapping, but you don't just land at something like this. Like, what was the precipitating event, and what was the thing that sent you down the path to create this sort of framework?
wow, okay, that's such an integrative question, and that's part of what I want us to talk about today too. Is where this idea of integration fits into our tapping framework. So,
And if you just want to start talking about the work and we can kind of weave the story into that works as well. Don't feel like we need to do the story and then talk about it. Like, talk about it in a comprehensive way.
okay, awesome. So I am at heart, in passion and training, an educator. I'm a teacher. It's what I'm passionate about. And I have taught for my entire life. I started my first school when I was 4 years old.
Yep.
In the backyard. My grandfather and grandmother had built me a playhouse, and they had furnished it with a stove and a fridge and a crib and all these beautiful playhouse things. And I promptly took all of that stuff out and made desks and chairs and invited the neighborhood kids in. So this is what I have spent my entire life doing. And I started teaching in the secondary system here in Canada, moved into the post-secondary system, college, university, and so on and so on. And so I have been fascinated for my entire life with what are the conditions under which human beings evolve, under which they learn the best. And what has been reinforced for me over and over again is that the systems that we support for education don't supply those conditions under which learning happens most optimally.
Okay.
Right? That we have created systems which are about negative reinforcement. But the biology, the wisdom of the body is actually requires safety and a container of support and a sense of joy and happiness. And that's where it learns and evolves organically. And so I've spent my entire life looking at, well, how does one do that within a coaching therapy practitioner framework? And And then the second piece of this is, as I'm, climbing the ladder of academia, I am also dealing with an issue of infertility. And so for 7 years, husband and I dealt with that issue every which way we can figure out. And we finally get pregnant. I give birth to this child. And in that moment, I truly experience love, like a full body, holistic, head to toe and beyond feeling of love. And I went, this is what it's all about. This is what I want to teach. And so as events unfolded after that, I also had a pretty serious case of postpartum depression. Not that we knew that 30 years ago.
Right.
I'm traveling to 13 different doctors, trying to get somebody to fix me. And in the course of that, as I began to heal from that with help from other people, therapists in particular, I began to really change my whole perspective on life. It's like, I don't want to teach business. I don't want to teach, communications. I want to teach what's at the real heart of being a human being. And so back I went to school, became a therapist and so on and so on. And great, opened my practice, people came, they were satisfied. I was not feeling the fulfillment, satisfaction that I had wanted to. Like, what I saw was people feeling better in certain areas and not feeling better overall. And there's something missing here.
Yep.
And so I went on an exploration of what's missing, which is where then EFT found me, called me, resisted it for years. It's like, nah, I'm not a person who's like, I'm not tapping all over my face. This is absolutely ridiculous. And of course, these were early days. There was no research. I felt like a little island out there. I didn't know anybody else who was tapping, and so on and so on. But I really, really liked what tapping brought to my personal life, what it brought to my professional life. As I continued with the tapping, though, I had some concerns about and the way it was being trained. And so that started me off on this journey of integration. How do I take everything that I've learned and integrate it with tapping into an entire framework of supporting human transformation? Right? And so that's where I am now. That's what the National EFT Training Institute does. And I am now feeling the satisfaction and the fulfillment that I was searching for all along.
So then inside of that, then what then is a post-trauma? You can tell I've been sitting here for 20 hours, 22 hours. What is a post-trauma growth framework? Articulate.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, there may be some sacred cows executed along the way here. I hope we're up for this.
Yeah.
A post-trauma growth framework does not hold trauma as its focus.
Okay.
I think, and what I am hoping to catalyze in the EFT world is an evolution. Like, nothing is standing still. This world is changing underneath our feet.
Right.
And I want to support that happening within the EFT world too. So right now in the EFT world, we're all about trauma sensitive, trauma informed, trauma this, trauma that. We have a focus on the suffering. And that was so necessary, in the psychotherapy, the coaching field. We didn't know anything about trauma until 30 years ago when it started to come on the scene. And so we see it as the great savior. Like, let's focus in on the trauma. The trauma is what is creating the constraints in the day-to-day life of our clients today. So we'll just focus in on that trauma. We'll go re-experience, relive it, et cetera, and everything is going to be fine. The issue that I began to discover in working with my clients and through my training is that, of course, as we know, what you focus on expands. And so this focus on the trauma itself, well-intentioned as we are, is actually in some very significant ways doing harm. And
Mhm.
that's our first principle, right? Do no harm. So how can we instead work with the biology, trust the wisdom of the body, that it knows how to dissolve trauma. It knows how to heal. And instead, how do we put our focus on the conditions under which the body can go ahead and do that? So rather than a focus on the trauma, the focus becomes on the growth, on the increase of the capacity of the system to process information. We call information energy in our field, right?
Yep.
To increase what at NEFTI, the EFT Institute here, what we call the window of joy. You know, other people historically have called that the window of tolerance, but our
Mhm.
focus is on joy, it's on love, it's on connection. So we call that the window of joy. So what does that mean to actually move out of this negativity bias where the attention is on safety, 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 safety? That's the
Mhm.
first biological imperative of the nervous system. How do we actually make the fundamental transformation, which is supporting the system to move away from that focus into a focus on what's good, what's enriching, what's joyful? And
Mhm.
that then will naturally expand this window of joy. The body takes on the task of doing what it's built to do, which is to release what's in its way of greater joy.
So, so I appreciate that, and that's the next logical step. So then, practically, what does that mean other than recognizing the fact that it's not just about creating transformation, but also moving to the thing that is beyond the transformation? And as you say that, one of the things I think about is I think about a Sue scale. Oftentimes we're in a circumstance where most people who are taught the basics of tapping are taught a SUD scale, subjective unit of stress, where
Yeah.
0 to 10, where we're saying how distressed we are. A Sue scale goes from -10 to +10. So
Yes.
it's not just about eliminating my fear, but it's being comfortable inside of my own skin. So I might start at a -4 where I'm fearful, and I might end at a +5 that is comfortable inside of my own skin and taking direct action.
Yeah. And I think that's a first step toward what
Hmm.
I'm talking about. Okay. One of the issues that I've discovered is when, let me say it this way, I love tapping.
Hmm.
I love what it does. I have never found anything in, 25, 30 years that can shift the state of the nervous system as quickly and as reliably as tapping.
Hmm.
And so when I first came into this field, we didn't have that. We, as therapists, it's like, don't go to the negative because we don't know what to do with it, right? People will get stuck there. And so
Hmm.
we just avoided it. So tapping then allowed us to actually go and start holding the space for the suffering.
Hmm.
Now, what I see in the EFT world, though, is that we've become addicted to that. And where our growth is in holding the both and.
Hmm.
So once you've held the suffering, and the suffering, the SUD scale, is changing in the direction that the client wants to go, then how do you actually also hold the container for this evolution of joy, which would be the
Hmm.
SUD scale that you're talking about, right? So it's a both and approach, an integrative approach. Now, what does that look like practically in a session? Here's, I think, another really key point is that it depends on who the client is in that particular moment and also in their life as a whole.
Um,
So part of what I teach, conscious EFT, brings to the table is the ability to assess in any given moment the state of what I call the weather of the nervous system.
hmm.
So we've got the weather, we've got the climate. So perhaps my climate as an individual is generally very pleasant, it's warm, it's sunny, but circumstances in my life might be causing a lot of thunderstorms in the daily weather. I, as a practitioner, need to be able to assess all of that in order to determine what the most appropriate intervention is in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not doing that and I take a general approach to this, it's like, okay, I know EFT tapping, so that's what we're going to do. And I just bring that, the potential is that I may do harm to that system.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's a really, really important post trauma growth framework idea, is that the intervention has to be in alignment, in attunement with where that system is in that particular moment. So I'm getting to answer your question here, Gene.
Yep.
So based on what that assessment is, my work, practically speaking, with that client is going to look different.
Mm-hmm.
So I may have a client come in whose climate is generally stormy. They're struggling. Maybe the weather is really stormy too. There, it's all about attunement. Right? It's all about being with that person in the suffering. That's
Mm-hmm.
what the need of that nervous system is. On the other hand, client may come in and the weather is good, the climate is good, they've just got a goal they want to achieve. So attunement isn't an issue with that client because that client's spending time in their social engagement system. Hopefully I, as a practitioner, am also spending time in my social engagement system. Attunement isn't such an issue. It's going to be a natural connection. And there, then, my intervention with that client may not even involve tapping. Right? It's going to be more goal-oriented, what's in the way, and let's brainstorm all of this kind of stuff. Regardless, what I'm looking for as the practitioner is where organization in the system breaks out in the middle of chaos. Sorry, my training is as a mathematician, so I studied complex systems and all of that. So even though a client may come very dysregulated, very disoriented, very chaotic, as we bring the appropriate intervention to them, organization will break out. We call that the spark.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm watching for as the practitioner. I need to train myself. I need to do my own work in order that I can recognize the spark and I can fan the flames of that spark, because that's where the capacity of that system is increasing. So that looks different in different situations. Someone who's in an enormous amount of distress, it may take 3 sessions before a spark breaks out.
Right.
But when it does, I'm paying preferential attention to the spark.
Mm-hmm.
In a titrated way. So someone with a lot of disorganization, they can't take much attunement to joy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That system will go collapse back again into its dorsal nature, right? So I also have to titrate this idea of fanning the flame of the spark. Let me stop there, and that's a lot I said.
Well, it is. And, one of the ways that I have always described myself in my work is I just describe myself as a practicalist. Yeah. And what I mean by that is a lot of what you are saying here is it's about what is the work that needs to be done to create the thing that we want.
Right.
And sometimes the first thing that we need to do is we need to create, emotional regulation and be in the system and be in the moment and just be safe where we are,
Absolutely.
because oftentimes oftentimes when you ask someone what they want, they don't know. But you can ask them the question, what don't you want? And we use that as a starting point. And so, so what you're saying is, it sounds very, very straightforward in regards to, the way that I think about healing and transformation as we're stepping into this, because, it's again, like the Sue scale is an oversimplification of it, but, it's, for me, it's not for me, it's not even necessarily about pain relief, because it's about the improvement of quality of life. And
Absolutely.
I was greatly informed very early on in my training, by Dan Clary, who's a hypnotist who specializes in pain management. And Dan was in a circumstance where in the 70s he was in a motorcycle accident, and I hope I'm telling the story accurately. He was in a motorcycle accident and he lost the use of his right arm. And it feels as if his right arm is being pulled off of his body every moment of his life since the 70s. And so he is in a circumstance in which the signal of pain is going to be something that is there. He was given a surgical option. They said, we could do surgery, and we got 1 of 2 options. Half the time you're going to be pain-free, and half the time you're going to be dead. He decided not to flip a coin for his life. I can appreciate making that particular choice. Yeah. And so from what I've learned from his teaching is it's this idea of what is the systematic, internal, external, structural, dispositional changes that we can make that improve the quality of the life that we are having. Right. And this idea of sparking joy, because it can be possible for me not to change the signal of pain in my body at all, and dramatically improve the quality of my life.
Absolutely.
And that isn't always the case. Sometimes we can have the signal of pain, and it's something that is so oppressive that it just, like there are times in which I can tune out the really loud conversation at the next table, and there are times in which I cannot tune out the fire alarm. Right. Like both of them are noises that are discomforting to what is going on. And one of them, even though it's super, super big, I can tune it down enough that I can be fully present and enjoy a lovely evening, where one of them is not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and really that's our EFT setup phrase, isn't it? Even though insert, right, I am choosing peace, calm, whatever it is that system wants in that moment. And I totally agree. I love what you're saying. My challenge to that would be, I think that coaching / therapy is facing a bit of a challenge at the moment. And again, I have to say that I'm not a fan of this phrase EFT practitioner. Right? I am more supportive of helping people sort out, am I a regulated person? Am I not regulated by some government organization, right? I think informed consent is such a huge issue, and this world doesn't know what an EFT practitioner is. So so that's why I'm talking about therapy and coaching. That's the framework that I'm operating within. And I think we're at a very challenging time in these helping fields, as we're recognizing that a lot of that work historically has really been helping people to adapt to an unkind context. If you look at, corporate situations, right, where a client may come in and say, like, my boss is an idiot and I really hate this and blah, 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 but I'm feeling stuck here. And a lot of the work at a surface level could be about helping that person feel better about where they are, rather than how do we actually help that person to move into an empowered position around that and determine what it is they themselves want.
And as you say that, like I don't personally, I don't see that as revolutionary. Like I think that that's the work that we do.
Yeah, I do. I think that's the nature of the training that we want to bring to people who are excited and have a calling in this field. Is a broad kind of a diverse training, not necessarily narrowly focused on EFT tapping. Right? That the skills about being with human beings and facilitating change are bigger than EFT.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always worked from the disposition that like I can teach you EFT in the back of the napkin.
Yeah.
And everything else beyond that's the art of delivery. And like for me, dispositionally, I've always been in a circumstance that whatever tool that I use that is useful, tapping becomes a multiplying power on top of that particular thing. Recently I was running a training of some sort, and in the chat box, someone just went, "Oh, you studied NLP."
Right.
because like my NLP is showing, like my hypnosis is showing, my parts mediation is showing, like all of that stuff is showing, is because that's actually the work that I'm doing. I just happen to be using these points to downregulate what is going on in the system so that I can do the memory consolidation, so I can create the path forward, so I can create the clarity, so we can, like you're talking about, find that spark of joy and craft that thing that is moving forward in that really specific way. And as you say that, the other thing that I think we need to be really careful of, though, is that we also can't rush ahead too quickly in that particular process, because if we're in a circumstance where, you know, we become too future focused, then we are building our future on unstable ground that we might have taken off the top layer, but we haven't gotten to the bedrock of the traumatic stuff, which is still sitting on a fault line that might show up. And it can feel like, yes, we're moving forward in this really thoughtful and deliberate way. And for me, just because, like, for me, the learning of the last 5 to 10 years is actually been, instead of rushing ahead to sparking the joy, is actually slowing down in the transformational process.
Absolutely. Right. That's what has catalyzed my understanding that I sit with today, is having clients come to me who'd had experiences with other EFT practitioners, right, where it was too soon, too fast, too much. And the practitioner didn't have yet that idea of titration and really being with that system exactly where it is. The metaphor I like to use is, one day I was in my local park and I saw a father and his young child, you know, maybe 2-ish, on the swing. And the dad is, you know, pushing the swing and being there, you know, letting that child know, I'm here, I'm here. And what struck me is that it's a bit like, without the skill to titrate, that it's like the dad pushing too much, right? What that experience would be like for that little child, right? They've lost their safety. So they've lost the joy. They've lost the connection with dad, right? And rather, like you're saying, to really titrate the amount based on where that system is, and hold where it's necessary to hold, and push a little when it's necessary to push. That's, you know, that's the fine art.
And so for someone who is thinking about this sort of dispositionally for the first time, what is, so it's great to go, great, I don't just want to be leaving the pain, I want to be creating something, I want to be crafting something that's transformational inside of my life. Awesome, I give you a thumbs up, I buy into that. And
here comes,
you know, and like and I want to sprout wings and fly away. Like, just because I know what the outcome is, what do the steps look like for someone who is approaching this in a new way that allows them to be able to think not just getting out of, but getting into? Like, what is something that is useful in a process like that? Because, and I say that, and I ask that because, again, that thing I started with is this idea that, you know, oftentimes when we are in distress, the only thing we can see is being out of distress.
Absolutely.
Like, I can't paint the picture of the thing that is next, because it's not even believable that I'm going to leave pain. How is it possible for me to vision something that's further down the road?
Absolutely. So I talk about a framework. It's not a linear framework, but it sounds linear when I talk about it. And the first step, most important than anything else, is attunement. This being with, right? Being with our own nervous system as a practitioner, right? Being able to have awareness of where that is, being able to intervene, bring ourselves back to a place of joy and connection, but also being with where that client is. So this is attunement. Now, when people are in pain, when they're suffering, as you say, when that's everything in front of their face and they have no capacity for anything else, it's all about attunement.
Yep.
It's all about compassion. It's about modeling to that client what they don't have the capacity to bring to themselves in that moment. Okay, so Attunement is an absolutely necessary first step. Some people call that presence, whatever it is. It's this ability to be with ourselves and to be with another human being
Yep.
in ways that are based in compassion, acceptance, and love. But and that's safety.
Yep.
And it's it's the first imperative of a nervous system. If there's not sufficient safety, we're going nowhere. The second step, though, is as you watch for these sparks of organization and you preferentially support them, the system will move into differentiation. The system will be able to start identifying what it actually does want. It's not so constrained by this negativity bias of what I don't want.
Yep.
So, that's going to show up in lots of different ways. It's going to be about, I really would prefer to have peace. Or it's going to start to show up in the ability to differentiate amongst the channels of human experience. Right? So somebody comes in, they're totally cognitively focused. That's their strongest channel. They've got ruminating thoughts, all kinds of negativity stuff going on in their cognitive channel. They have no access to their emotions, no access to their sensations, no imagery going on, right? Behavior, very, very constrained. So differentiation is going to be the start of that ability to witness different channels of experience. So in that, another example of that would be the parts work. Right? Now I can start to witness. There's a part of me. What's the purpose of that part? So on and so on and so on. Now, as we continue to fan the flames, fan the spark, that the wisdom of the body, if we can get ourselves out of the way, the wisdom of the body is going to move to integration. And integration is where the growth happens. It's where the capacity begins to expand. And then if we can keep watching for the sparks there, whole sessions can be about the celebration of everything that's happening for that client and just, celebrating with. And then that leads to the evolution. That leads to whatever it is that is meant to be coming next for that person. And so what we're wanting to do is to sort out what that person needs in this particular moment. Do they need, for example, I struggled for years. I recognized pretty early on in tapping that it was just amazing for sympathetic activation, where there's a lot of big energy overactivation of that sympathetic nervous system. But I struggled with, nobody's talking about the dorsal frozen piece here. And what does that mean? Right? What does it mean to bring safety and support to a system that's frozen? Right? Well, that means attunement. That means holding the space, holding the suffering with no demand for anything else. And it was what I was noticing is that we were missing that piece, and we kept putting demands on the system. Right? We kept offering it more information when it's actually in a place where it can't process the information it already has. And so that's what I'm loving about my work these days is this capacity to actually differentiate between interventions that are going to be helpful for safety versus interventions that'll be helpful for growth.
And I think one of the things that is has been teased out over the course of the last 22 hours is the recognition that there's so many different types of transformation that this one tool happens to be super, super powerful in leaning into. Like just 2 hours ago, we spent a bunch of time talking about emotional first aid. And what does it look like in a moment of crisis? And how do we just regulate a system in that particular way? We have conversations about how do we take very severe trauma, sexual trauma, physical trauma, cultural trauma, religious trauma, and how do we clear those particular things? Then there's this entire vein of things where it's like, I would like to be taking different action, or I would like to be showing up in the world in a different way. And so it's not a
Mhm.
stepping out of, it's a stepping into. And as I am stepping into, I am bumping into all of the old identities and the parts that support an old story, not a current story.
Right.
And so I think that like one of the like it is lovely that 30 years ago we were commanded to go try it on anything.
Yeah.
And we're now in a circumstance where we're recognizing, okay, there are appropriate ways to do lots of things.
Yeah.
And we're like kind of thinking about the way we put those particular things in containers.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing, besides just like thinking about like, the phrase that I've used multiple times over the course of the last day is, if you are not qualified to work with something without tapping, tapping does not qualify you to work with it. You're like, tapping is not the qualifying principle inside of this stuff.
Thank
And
you.
so I like the thing that I think is most useful in what you're talking about here is it is not about the tool set. It's about the process and the outcome that we are looking for. And that is something that is unique from experience to experience and client to client and moment to moment in what we are doing.
Mhm.
And the process gets a little bit muddied when we're using the same tool in all of these different places, and it becomes really easy to lump it in as it is the same thing, when the reality is me stimulating this point and down regulating cortisol in my body is a really different thing than me tapping on this point and talking to a 4-year-old part and trying to create transformation so I recognize I'm safe in the world, even though I might be saying phrases out loud, even though I might be tapping on the exact same point on the body. And so I
Yeah.
think what we're having is a maturing of
Mhm.
understanding. And it's not, and part of it is like, part of the maturing is like a niching down process, that when we niche down, we communicate better, we're able to run more effective businesses, we're able to do the work that we like. But the other piece of it is recognize, not necessarily niching down like topic areas, but recognizing that there are multiple varieties of healing and transformation that happen,
Mhm.
and we do ourselves a disservice by lumping them into a single basket.
Yes, exactly. And to everything you've said, I'd say hallelujah, underline, put it in bold. And I would feel remiss if I didn't also say what's required to do that is the practitioner's own extent of their own window of joy, the extent to which they have done the work about
Mhm.
clearing their patterns. And we give lip service to that, I think, in our field, right? Everybody says that, but it's a really serious thing because, in my opinion, who I am as a person
Mhm.
is much more important than any modality I might have, like tapping or NLP or
Yeah.
IFS or any of those things, right? It is who I am as a nervous system, my capacity to hold the space and to assess the position of the other person. That's the real gift that I bring to the work.
And I think that what is happening with you and the training that you're doing is a reflection of just the maturing of the environment and the community that we're in. Like, because we went, 25 years ago, you watched a DVD. 20
Yeah.
years ago, you got a certificate, which, and for those that don't know, the difference between a certificate and a certification is a certificate demonstrated that you showed up. Like if you showed up for a weekend, you got a level 1 certificate. A certification is a process in which we are demonstrating competency in what is going on. And then accreditation is a governing body looking at someone who's doing certification and saying, yes, you actually have standards inside of this, because I can say, I am certifying you and you have to do stuff with me to prove that you're doing it, but I might not be credible in doing that. And so what is happening, like where you are in the type of work that you're doing, is a demonstration of a maturing of a field and industry. I don't even know what the right word is, but just recognizing the fact that, just because we can doesn't mean that we should. And, like I can wield a scalpel. I better not be cutting out someone's appendix, but boy, can I cut
Not me.
things,
Not
because
me.
I was a teenage boy. Because I was a teenage boy, I'm qualified to cut things because that's what teenage boys do. But I'm not skilled in a way to do something like that, that is healthy, that is useful, that is all of those things.
Yeah.
And so I think it is a good and useful thing for us to be continuing the conversation. And the nice thing that comes from a maturing field is it I don't know if repels is the right word, but it creates a greater amount of friction for wounded healers.
Yeah.
And for those that aren't familiar with that phrase, the wounded healer is the person who is going out to heal so they don't have to look at their own wound. It's like everybody else is struggling, therefore I don't have to worry about what's going on. And when all you need is to watch a series of DVDs or to show up to a weekend and they hand you a certificate, it's
Yeah.
much easier for someone to show up in the world in that way. And as frustrating as it can be and as expensive as it can be for some people to go, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is what training and formation looks like. What that barrier of entry does is it makes sure those of us who are working with clients are more likely to be skilled, are more likely to be well formed. And what you're saying is really good formation isn't just about me as a practitioner. Really good formation is about me doing internal work so that when I am showing up, and that's, and you I don't know if you poo-pooed it, but that's part of what this idea of trauma-informed comes from, is it's not just trauma-informed about who I'm helping, but it's trauma-informed about who I am and how I am showing up inside of all of that. And so it's a natural progression. And, the other thing is, Peta and I were talking about this earlier, like typically the tipping point she was mentioning with a modality and research is somewhere between 17 and 19 years is the point where there's that body of work. And we're just at that threshold.
Yeah.
For you and I, it feels like tapping has been around forever.
Right.
In the world of healing and transformation and that sort of stuff, like, we're just a speck on this timeline. It's kind of like our lifespan on Earth compared to the history of the galaxy. We're at like 11:59 and 58 seconds on December 31st of the year of time. And so there's this really natural tension. And this is something that I can really appreciate. So in technology, we would talk about the leading edge, the cutting edge, and the bleeding edge.
Yeah.
So like with technology, like the leading edge is the stuff that consumers have, that's the new stuff. The cutting edge is the geeky people. The bleeding edge is like the folks that are in the trenches and creating stuff. And the place that you're standing right now in our field is on the bleeding edge. And it is really difficult being the herald at the bleeding edge, because you are seeing a landscape that the community is not. And so you can't just say this is the way forward. You have to say, hey, this is the education you need. Now that you understand the landscape that we're on, this is the way forward.
Yes. And to honor the position of all of the people, right? We need people on the leading edge, the cutting edge. We need people on the bleeding edge. Like there's no right or wrong about that, right? It is this beautiful just container of acceptance of what is. This is what evolution looks like, as you say. And it is. I mean, it's challenging to be on the bleeding edge, right? There are days where it's like, wouldn't it be nice to just have absolute certainty? Like just to know this is what works, do this, right? It's black and white. But that's not what it is.
And at the exact same time, so we have 30 speaking spots, 32 speakers over the course of the day. So there are 2 more speakers left. So 30 people have spoken so far. And I would be willing to bet 20 people talked about safety and going at a safe pace and who is qualified and who is not qualified. 2 different people said, if it's trauma, you don't tap on it on your own. You should be working with a practitioner. 4 years ago, if we would have gathered people who are in the same standing that we are today, half the people would not be talking about safety. People would not be saying that. They're just like, hey, this is a tool, go try that thing. Wouldn't it be really, really awesome?
Right.
And so I think it's important for us to be able to stand in the gap of going, oh my gosh, how much farther do we have to go? Isn't it great that we're on the vanguard and pushing that way? And oh my gosh, how much safer is the tapping community than it was 7 years ago, 15 years ago, 25 years ago?
Absolutely. And then what excites me is, okay, given that becomes the leading edge, then then the bleeding edge changes.
That's right. Yeah.
So, right?
Yeah.
That's where I feel like the post-trauma growth framework fits in. Like,
Yeah.
what comes after that conversation about safety and trauma
Yep.
informed, right? There's so much more. That's the evolutionary part of this framework, right? After
Yeah.
inspiration comes evolution. And
And
it's exciting.
and it's just one of those things that no matter what it is, it always feels like it's going too slow. And the reason why I know this is the case is because there is a product here in the United States called Quick Grits, and there is a product in the United States called Instant Quick Grits. So when Quick Grits are not fast enough for you, we have Instant Quick Grits for you.
Oh yeah.
And because we are in the circumstance that we consistently want, like there is, like you're talking about this natural urge for wanting better, this spark that is inside of us, and the moment something becomes the moment it is the new normal, it turns into the normal, and we've forgotten how far we've come. So the iPhone that I have right here is new. There's no button on it. So from the iPhone 8 to the iPhone 10, or from the 10 to the 11, the little button went away.
Oh.
And because I'm a ridiculous technology person, I buy all the new toys all of the time, computer science major, I have a problem. I appreciate that fact. And so I got the new form factor of an iPhone that doesn't have a button. It has a Face ID. 6 days later, I am at a conference. A friend of mine is standing on stage and he's about to do a 6-minute thing. He goes, "Can you record this for me?" And he hands me his phone, which is a phone that is one generation older, that I owned 7 days ago. And it took me 2 minutes to figure out how to get to his camera, because the new normal became the normal so quickly that old thing got ejected out of my head. And it's so easy for us who are pushing forward and trying to create transformation to constantly feel unsatiated, because the moment we take the next step forward, we see the next two. And then we take the step forward and we see and we see the possibility, what's out there. And so it's like, it's this interesting tension living in that space.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes good teaching, good training. Is someone who can hold the edge, hold the possibilities, and at the same time have some memory of what it was like not to be, right? To hold the both and again, right? Yeah. No, I totally know what you're talking about. I just came back from a couple weeks in Italy with two 30-year-olds and was asking them like to take pictures of me that I could share with my community.
Right.
They took my phone and went like, "Can't do that. I'll just take it and I'll text it to you."
Yeah. What are you doing with this tin can and string?
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, excellent. Well, Nancy, I really appreciate the thoughtful conversation. I appreciate the fact that there are people in the field who are thinking big thoughts and trying to find ways that we can move forward in a way that's thoughtful, that is deliberate, that is useful.
Yeah, well, Gene, I just love our conversations. I am just such a fan of what you're doing in the world generally, and this idea of yours to support Peaceful Heart. Like, just thank you so much, and thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you to your team too. They've been fabulous in terms of support and direction. It's been
and somehow in the room on the other side of this wall, they are still awake and still alive. And my two young friends in Vancouver are taking care of the technology. I can see at least one of them alive on my little window. I don't know if we lost the other one. So awesomeness. Thanks for your time, Nancy.
You're welcome. Take care, Gene. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.